joining us on Savvy Senior Sources, Talking with Experts. Let's take a moment and hear from our sponsors, GWG Life and Reverse Mortgages SIDAC.
Provide for your long-term care. Convert your life insurance towards payments for long-term care. If you are concerned about future health care, you can convert your life insurance to pay for home care or assisted living. Health problems can be stressful enough without the added burden of financial obligations. If you feel that you no longer need your life insurance policy, you may want to apply the value towards long-term care.
Hi, I'm Beth Paterson, a certified reverse mortgage professional with Reverse Mortgages SIDAC. Mike and Carol decided that they needed a one-level home to fit their changing health needs. They used the reverse mortgage to purchase their new home instead of using conventional financing. This has benefited them greatly. Barbara decided to do a reverse mortgage to pay off her conventional loan that she was making monthly payments on. She had funds left in the line of credit after paying that off. And a year or so later, when she fell and broke her shoulder, she was able to tap those lines of credit to pay for her home care. As she said, she would have been up the creek without a paddle without the reverse mortgage. If you'd like information on how to receive security, independence, dignity, and control in your retirement years, contact us. Hi, welcome to today's show of Savvy Senior Sources, Talking with Experts. Savvy Senior Sources guide your way through resources A to V through the TV shows as well as the Savvy Senior Sources Guide and our website. Visit SavvySeniorSources.com for information on various resources. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to our sponsors, GWG Life and Reverse Mortgages SIDAC, as well as Minneapolis Public Housing, who make this show possible today. I'm Beth Paterson, your host of the show, and I'd like to welcome my co-host, Marci Holley, back today. Thanks for being back with us today.
Thank you for having me back.
And Marci is with Minneapolis Public Housing, and also thank you for being a sponsor of the show.
We love your show.
Thanks. And today's topic is on senior housing options, and our guest is Jill Johnson with Johnson Consulting Services.
Yeah.
And we are really glad to have you with us today to share, to help people define the different senior housing, because it can be very confusing.
Exactly.
So let's start out in first, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here, appreciate it.
And let's start out and talk a little bit about what does Johnson Consulting do?
Well, Johnson Consulting Services is a company I founded over 25 years ago. I come from a market feasibility background. I used to work in the consulting division of one of the large CPA firms. And we were doing market feasibility studies for senior housing going back 30 years ago, including developing the methodology for determining how, the first methodology for market feasibility for assisted living that were among the first that were ever developed in the country. So I have a long and deep background in senior housing, and as part of that, we often would look at various competitive communities, and I have personally toured and been in over 2,000 senior living communities across the country, from coast to coast, from Seattle to Miami and Fort Lauderdale to New York and to California and everywhere in between. So I've seen a lot of the differences around what's around the country, and I work primarily now with doing a lot of senior turnarounds with distressed properties or properties that are looking at growth and expansion due to competitive market changes.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of what works and what doesn't work by going into a lot of these places.
Really, and you can see, because sometimes we have had to shop the competitors. And so you see differences in how you can go in and really assess what they have to offer and is this right for me. Plus, I've also been a caregiver, so I've actually shopped for senior housing for both my mother-in-law and an aunt, and I've advised a lot of friends and their families about what to do. So I'm taking that in the trenches expertise I have and sharing it with other people like you and your audience to help them better understand what they can do, because it's such a nerve-wracking process. You're so overloaded, and there's a lot of things that I've learned over the years that I think will be really helpful to your audience on what they can do and how they can make it work better for themselves and their family.
One thing I think is to know the different options ahead of time and have the discussion. We'll get into some more of that as we go along. But if you wait to the last minute, you lose choice and you lose options.
Yes, you do.
And then sometimes you get into the kids saying, you need to move, but mom's not ready to move, and then nobody's happy. So start having the conversations early on, and that's why we want to bring the show to people. Talk about the different types of housing. There's independent, there's assisted living, there's skilled care, group homes, residential
All
homes,
of the above.
all of the above.
Yeah.
And are they different in different parts of the country?
They are, and I think helping your audience understand first the big categories. So independent living in its broadest sense mean that the seniors still can live independently in that living environment. But they may have access to maybe one meal a day or some light housekeeping, some of those little services that are nice amenities to have, but not needed amenities. So in the independent living setting, you're still choosing to live that independent lifestyle. It's a want-based decision. I want to live here. When you start moving down what they call the continuum into maybe assisted living, then you're starting to cross over into that area where it's really a need-based decision. Mom or dad are having a little trouble dressing and bathing. They need maybe a little bit of support and supervision, maybe some medication reminders. Now you can get some of those services in independent living today.
Or in their home.
Or in their home.
And their single-family home.
Correct. But I'm just talking about in the congregate setting. And so, but in assisted living, you're typically looking at more of a need-driven decision. Same thing with skilled nursing. Although a lot of people who used to live in, the nursing home that grandma lived in, today that nursing home setting is a little bit different. A lot of those people are able to be served in assisted living if it's the right assisted living setting. And then what you're finding often is that skilled nursing today is in very much often shorter term stays. So you've gone to the hospital, you've had a hip replacement, you need physical rehab, they get you better, and then you moved back either to your own home or to another living environment. And so there are not as many people staying in the skilled nursing long-term setting as there was 30 years ago, because they can be accommodated in assisted living. So that's why as a consumer you really need to be educated, because you may not have to go to that most expensive level of care if you're mindful about how you evaluate your options and how you look at the resources in your community to see what's best for you. A group home setting is, again, a different type of setting, and each one is a little bit different as to what level of support they will provide. Typically, when you're getting into a group home setting, you're also more dealing with a need-based decision. There's either a need for supervision or there's a need for some sort of support. And beyond that, that's really the big broad categories. So
Group home and residential home, are they the same? Because I've heard both terms.
depends on the state that you're in. So in the state of Washington, it might be called one thing, and here it's called another. I was in a state once where if a nurse provided you any medication setup, which, here you can just buy that service typically. In a state like the state of Washington, now all of a sudden you're designated as an assisted living resident. So even though you're fully able to live independently, but you're just for your own peace of mind or the peace of mind for your children, having a little bit of support because maybe your medication setup is a little complicated. In some states that now designates you as assisted living. So I think it's important for your viewers to understand the requirements of the state they live in, and for the adult children to not get so locked into the wording, because I had an issue like that with when we were looking for my aunt. I had a cousin whose wife, her daughter-in-law, was adamant that my Aunt Gert needed assisted living. Well, in her mind, that's what it was. Gert really needed independent housing that had a few additional services. And the cost can be very different depending on the setting too. So if you're looking to stretch your budget, understanding those options is a very important way that you as a consumer can manage your budget better. So Gert ended up in a hybrid independent housing with access to services that was much less costly than a traditional assisted living setting, and it was absolutely the right environment for her. She got the services she needed, but she didn't have all the added expense, and it was because her daughter-in-law didn't understand enough about the housing options that she just kept saying, well, you need assisted living, assisted living, assisted living. And so that's how she was guiding Gert, and it was absolutely not quite the right thing for her because of her naivete.
A lot of people think assisted living is either low-income housing or, you know, they need assistance with their housing or their living.
Exactly.
So it really is a very loosely used word. I have a question about your skilled nursing because that's a new buzzword out there. Is that the same as transitional housing? I mean,
well, skilled nursing still does include that long-term heavy care component, but what you're finding is that because assisted living communities are looking to keep their residents longer, they don't want them to leave and go to skilled nursing. So they're now adding additional services that 10, 15 years ago were not offered. So they can do two-person transfers and use a Hoyer lift, which 15 years ago you would only find in skilled nursing.
Right.
Now today, with a sophisticated provider, you may be able to get that in an assisted living. You still pay for it, but it's a different.
You don't have to
it's
go
different
out.
dynamic.
Okay.
But transitional care, it's called subacute. It's transitional. There's a variety of different names depending on the player that you're dealing with. But in all of those settings, those designated beds are really about bringing you from the hospital, giving you the support you need, either with medical support because you've been very ill, or you maybe have had a cancer surgery and you need some added supervision because you're complex medications for 24 hours a day. But then you're usually looking at maybe a 15 to 16 day average stay. So if you have a hip replacement, the goal isn't you're going to stay there.
Right.
You're going to go there, get the rehab and support you need, and then you're going to go back to somewhere else. Now, for some people, they may stay in skilled nursing because their medical situation is so complicated that it really is an environment that's better for them versus assisted living. And if you're interested, I can share with you some of those nuances too. But yeah, it's different. It's different than it was.
I just want to go back to, because I mentioned about people can receive the home care, companion services, medication reminders, or that in their single family homes or where they have been for years. But it comes down to what is safety, you know, for people, and where do people want to live. And sometimes the kids think they need to move, but they want to stay in their home. It's important to have family discussions, and maybe you can stay in your home for a little while longer and receive the home care. Sometimes it may be more beneficial to move. So talk about that.
What I usually tell people is step back for a minute. Nobody wants to move from the home they've lived in for 50 years because the change is so big. But if you help the senior remember that when they bought that home, they were probably in their early 30s, they were typically a married family with young children. The home hasn't aged with them. And so oftentimes you'll find the doorways are too narrow for them to effectively navigate. The multi-level of the building, their washer and dryer is downstairs. There's stairs to get up to a bedroom. But the more important part is, what is the quality of life that they're living? Okay, fine. Yes, they can get home care services coming to assist them once or twice a day. I've seen seniors who recognize that the house is no longer serving their needs, and they look for, just as they did when they were buying that house to build their family, now it's about buying a home or finding a new home that will build their aging as well as possible and support that next phase. And if you begin to look at it like that, it's a different type of decision than we're pulling mom out of her home versus we're finding a right environment where mom can thrive in a much better way than maybe she's been thriving, because we've all been so worried about making the move. And there are reasons for the move, which I'd be happy to talk to as well.
And I specialize in reverse mortgages used to help people stay in their home and have the money to pay for services. And I often have the conversation of mom is like, well, I want to stay here no matter what. Well, then I start asking the questions about safety, you know, and a lot of times I want to stay here, but I don't want somebody to come into my house.
Well,
either.
Yeah.
And then you're into the whole conversation. Well, how are you going to make this happen? Because your kids can't come in and take care of you all the time either. So there has to be some conversation, some dialogue, and you know, that's what I encourage is. So how do you go about getting kids to talk about if they want to stay in their home, or if, you know, how to talk to them about from both sides, I guess, the senior talk or the adult children talking to their parents about thinking about the move. And as we've said, you need to do it earlier because then you've got plans and choices. And then we'll talk about the cost too.
Sure. Well, I think when you're looking at talking about the move, everybody has to think about not from their personal point of view, but what's best and right for mom or mom and dad. And a lot of times you'll hear adult children say, it's so expensive, I don't want to have mom spend all that money, because they're thinking about what am I going to get when she's gone, and it's all about the inheritance. And so when you've got any of that undercurrent going on, I always make people step back and go, let's look at the bigger picture. Yes, she could have someone come here and help, but as you said, who is that going to be? We did that. We actually 7 days a week supported my mother-in-law for almost 3 years in her home with someone going every day. So you've got that scheduling to manage, and she had health issues that just made that not safe for her. And then you also have to look at how vulnerable that senior is. You know, there are a lot of vulnerabilities when you're living alone that people don't think about. You know, there are scam artists who go and work neighborhoods. They go door to door, they talk their way into, oh, well, if you give me your valuables with this, you know, any of those war memorabilia that your husband got, I'll take it from you and I'll give you some cash for it, but I need to take it and appraise it. And because they're feeling they're vulnerable, and they were so grateful to have some company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And trust me, these scam artists are really adept at what they do.
Oh, they're wonderful.
I know of
My
seniors,
mother's been scammed just like that.
A woman that I know who was, you know, a brilliant woman. You know, she was an executive assistant at 3M for many years, bossed around all sorts of execs. She was taken. She was at a grocery store, and somebody talked their way into her car. She brought him back to her condo. They talked her out. They took her to the bank. They got her to withdraw money. I mean, trust me, this is happening every day.
We did a show on scams.
The other thing I would tell family members to look at is how much are you really doing for mom? And that's where the rubber meets the road. If you're doing grocery shopping every week, and you're doing lawn mowing, and you're doing laundry, and you're doing the transportation to all sorts of appointments to get her hair cut, to get other services done, and you're sitting and paying the bills for it, and I mean, all of a sudden, you now are her human doing. You're not her adult child.
Yeah.
You're a caregiver now. You are not, your relationship has shifted so that when you go, which frankly, let's be honest, becomes a burden and it gets irritating because we've got our own lawns to mow. And so now you're maintaining 2 households versus if you're in a setting where it can be, you can go back to being the family member again. So when you go to visit mom, it's actually to visit and to talk and to connect and to reminisce, not that hour that you've allocated for that today is all errands. Then it just is a different relationship. And what we find, and what I've seen happen over and over again, is when people actually can go back to being family, the quality of the interactions just blossoms again in such a profound way. But I understand that it's not for everybody, and so those resources are important resources. But I think it is very important then as family that you figure out, how are we going to monitor? How are we going to make sure that she's getting what we're paying for, and that this is a really positive experience? And then maybe looking at other resources besides home care. Your local church, do they have volunteers who will come and visit? Are there other community resources? Maybe it's a Meals on Wheels program where it's different interaction.
To think about and have the discussions, and a lot of times I find that the adult children, they're trying to make the decision versus letting mom, who is
Yes.
still competent.
Oh, absolutely.
you
That
know,
happens all the
make
time.
decision.
And that is exactly with my Aunt Gert, how we finally had it, because I knew that what the kids were talking about, and I finally just said, Gert, here's the deal. You know you can't manage this home any longer. The kids are coming over, they're vacuuming for you, they're getting your groceries, they're bringing your mail in, they're taking your garbage down to the end of the driveway. I mean, they're doing all these things, and you know, in their mind, you need too much assistance to be able to live on your own again. And I said, so at what point are you going to take control back and decide what you want for yourself? And she just
I bet she
looked
just
at,
was like,
oh
whoa.
yeah, well, because it was about giving her back control.
Her power.
And I
Yeah.
said, look, I've looked at your finances. I know you can afford this. Do you want me to see if I can find a couple places to have you go look? We don't have to tell the kids we're looking. We can just go take a look and you can see for yourself. And that is exactly what we did. And I found the perfect place for her. And I share the rest of that story later, but it was perfect.
We're getting down to only a couple minutes, so share the story now.
Okay. Well, what we did is we went in, and Gert used a walker, and so she could navigate just fine. But it's an overwhelming thing when you're going into tour senior housing for the first time. These places feel very big, and you're overloaded because you've got so much coming in, so much stimulation, because again, most of these people have been in their own home in a very narrow world for a long time. So what we did with Gert is I called ahead, and I knew they had a wheelchair, and I said, look, she could ambulate completely fine by herself, but for the tour I want her in the wheelchair so that she's not expending all her energy navigating, but that she can actually see and take it all in. So we went in, took the wheelchair, and we went around and we looked at each different area of the building. And I talked to her about, Gert, now how do you think you would use this? Do you think you would, where do you think you'd like to sit in this dining area? Where I put her in the building. Do you follow me?
yeah.
Versus what a lot of people do is they just, you know, look, here's the closets, here's the cupboards, you know, here's where your bed would go. I encourage you to help them see themselves living in the building. This is where you would play cards when your bridge club comes over. This is where you would go to get your hair cut. This is where you would go to play bingo, or when they have the lecture series come in. This is where the speaker will be. So all of a sudden when she goes home, she's imagining herself, and they had the perfect unit that had just come open. And I said to her, do you want me to put some cash down now to have them hold this apartment for you? I said, we'll get the money back because those deposits are refundable. I said, but this will hold it and they won't call anybody else. And she said yes. And she decided that day. And the best part was when we got upstairs into the hair salon, this woman looked at her and went, Gert, is that you?
Oh.
And here, because I picked places that I knew people from the old neighborhood had gone, so I knew where people from her church had gone, I knew where people from her community had gone, that was where her friends were, and so she was able to fit right in. So if you're looking as an adult child on how to find places, then you want to talk to the local church and some of the other people from the neighborhood. Where did your parents go? And go tour them yourself. If you're not ready to have that conversation with your mom or dad yet, you find out some options and you go visit first. Then you can get the brochures, you can start looking at the price sheets, you can start to understand what the costs are, and you know that there have been friends and family of people that you know that have gone there and have been satisfied. That's how you really want to do it, so you can pre-screen before you ever get mom or dad involved. And that's what I did for both my mother-in-law and for Gert. I knew exactly which ones would work. And there were tons of places that I looked at that Gert couldn't, I knew from what was open, she couldn't navigate the floor plan.
Okay, we're out of time. I know we could always.
We'd love to do another show.
Just real quick on cost, most of the assisted living are private pay.
Yes.
An option to help pay for that is from our sponsor, GWG Life, which is converting life insurance policies into cash. And that can be used to help pay. So if you've got a life insurance policy that you don't need. So with that, thank you, Jill, for
Thank you.
joining us and sharing insights on choosing and understanding and choosing senior housing. Marci, thank you for being co-host as well as sponsoring the show, Minneapolis Public Housing. And a final thank you to our sponsors, GWG Life and Reverse Mortgages SIDAC. And don't forget to visit SavvySeniorSources.com for resources to help guide your way. Thanks for joining us today.
What is the secondary market for life insurance? The secondary market for life insurance is an emerging financial market that provides individuals options with their policies. These options allow policyholders to benefit from the value of their life insurance. Policies are sometimes a financial burden, especially for seniors, as premiums often increase over time. The secondary market offers financial alternatives that can help policyholders benefit from their life insurance now.
Hi, I'm Beth Paterson, a certified reverse mortgage professional with Reverse Mortgages SIDAC. Bob's wife passed away, meaning his Social Security income was cut in half. His financial advisor suggested he look into a reverse mortgage. With the reverse mortgage, he was able to take a dream vacation with his nephew, and oh, the stories that they can share. After Bob passed away, his niece shared the difference that it made to the whole family. Dorothy did the reverse mortgage in order to protect her other retirement funds. With her line of credit, she was able to travel, buy a new car, and do home repairs. Years later, she's still benefiting from the reverse mortgage line of credit and not having to rely on her children. For more information on how you too can have security, independence, dignity, and control, contact us.